Our next speaker is Kaye Nardella. She commenced her working life as a cartographer with the Department of Mapping and Surveying, 1978 to 1990. After starting her family, she came back to the department part-time in 1990 and 1998, sorry. It was rather a miracle the way you managed all that, I thought. Was working part-time at the John Oxley Library in the archives area and completed a Bachelor of Arts and graduate diploma in library studies. She's commenced full-time work with her department in 2004, providing support for a land and mapping application. Appointed as Curator of the Museum of Lands Mapping and Surveying on the retirement of Bill Kitson in 2007, we utterly rely on Kaye. You need to take in everything she's got to say as well as what Carmel had to say.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that introduction. I'm going to be looking at what's in a title and land titles, records and other resources provided by the Department of Natural Resources and Mines. Okay. It all starts with land. To manage land, you need some way of uniquely identifying blocks of land. In Queensland, we used two systems that I've labelled the first one the original system and the current system. In the original system, the system of description was based on where the block was located and also the size of the block. Pastoral runs and holdings, really large properties, their property description was based on the name of the pastoral run and the pastoral district. An example is Starvation Camp, the Darling Downs Pastoral District. The particular gentleman who was leasing Starvation Camp in the late 1860s, he was leasing another two properties adjacent, and they were called Vexation and Burning Thirst. In all my research, they're the most evocative names and my favourite names, and you think he must have been having a really bad time when he was naming those. Okay, blocks located in towns and cities, they're given an allotment of a section of a town. For example, allotment 12 of section 8, town of Calvert. Blocks located in the country areas are given a portion number of a parish, and sometimes you need to also know the county administered area as well. An example, portion 56, parish of Blenheim. Why you sometimes need to know the county, administrative areas, counties were about 40 square miles, a large administrative area. They were subdivided into smaller areas called parishes. There are a number of parishes in Queensland that have the same name allocated to different counties. For example, the parish of Marathon is in 3 different counties. There's the parish of Conondale in the county of Lennox and also in the county of March. And of course, you look back and you think, why did they do these things? These two parishes of Conondale actually abut each other. One's in the county of Lennox, one in the March. Okay, so sometimes you need, when you're researching history of land ownership, you need to know the county information. When a freehold block is subdivided, the words that they use are subdivision, we abbreviate to sub and re-subdivision. So the first time a freehold portion is subdivided, it's given sub. So it's subs 1 and 2 of portion 56. Then if the sub 1 is subdivided and the person sells off half of the block, those 2 blocks are called re-subs 1 and 2, and well, in case if you subdivided 3 of sub 2. The more you subdivide, they repeat that pattern. So the next time a block is subdivided, it becomes sub. And then if it in turn is subdivided, it becomes re-sub. So they just toggle between those 2 terms. Okay. There are a number of variations used for property descriptions in the original system. For example, why just only use portion numbers, actually like 56, when you can use subs A and B? You can have a portion 1A, a portion 10V, and descriptions other than portions are sometimes used, particularly in Brisbane. You'll come across Eastern Suburban Allotment as the original title, Western Suburban Allotment, Suburban Portion, and Suburban Allotment. And we're talking about creating a unique way of identifying a block. So there should only be one portion and parish type description for every block, and that's what I had been led to believe. And I had a client come in to seeking some historical information. I think it was portion 34, parish of Kedron. So I called it up, located it on my system, and I said, "Is this where you think the blocks is?" And she said, "No, no, no, it's across the other side of town from there." And I said, "Oh, yes, right." So I checked, and I searched some other records that I have access to, and I found, sadly, in this instant, there are 2 portion 34s in the parish of Kedron. So when I found the location, the other one, that was where her block was located. But it's very, very, very rare. In all my research, I've only found 2 instances where there have been 2 portions numbers in the same parish. Okay. Property descriptions. As land was subdivided, we're using this resub of sub. It became really, really complicated and very, very complex. This is an example taken from a 1966 title, and this is to the land owned by the Royal Queensland Golf Club. And I've just highlighted the description, and there's the bit that I've highlighted. If you read through that, and that's just one part of the description, it's just very, very complex. So a decision was made in the 1960s, mid-1960s, that we were going to replace that system with the current system. And in the current system, a unique identifier was created for a block of land by allocating each block on a survey plan with a unique number called a lot number, and using the survey plan number as part of the description. So we went from portion on parish to lot on survey plan. So it's some examples: lot 12 and RP 34533. Okay, so after this decision was made, when new titles were issued, they were allocated a lot on plan title. And of course, we had lots of existing titles that still had subs of resubs. So as time permitted, we had people within the department updating the titles with the new description. So the portion, the lot that we've all been focusing on, which is the number 5, 6th Avenue, Kedron, it became from the resub 134 of sub A, etc. It was converted to lot 134 on RP 25044, and it was converted in 1986. That's a copy of the stamp from the title. Okay. So we have a way of describing blocks so they have a unique description. To manage land, you also have to have a way of holding land and some way of recording that ownership. And land tenure is the way that we can do that. And in Queensland, there's 2 main types of land tenure. There are other types, but the 2 main ones are leasehold and freehold. Okay. Freehold tenure is a form of land ownership that sees land being held by owners and their heirs indefinitely. And for the purposes of today's session, I'm going to be just concentrating on freehold tenure. And freehold tenure in Queensland, it is administered by the Titles Registry of the Department of Natural Resources and Mines, my department. Okay, there have been 2 land tenure systems used in Queensland to administer freehold titles. The first is the old land system. It was introduced in 1842 when the first freehold titles were issued over blocks in Queen Street in the city centre. So that's when our titling system commenced in terms of freehold. And the first title that's issued over a block when it's, inverted commas, sold by the Crown is a deed of grant. In the old land system, any further dealing with that land was through certificates of indenture. Okay, so when, if your block of land had its first freehold block created prior to 1862, it remained being administered via the old land system until the freehold owner decided they wanted to bring it into the Torrens system. There were still a number of blocks being administered in this old land system in the mid-1990s when our department arranged for them to be transferred into the Torrens system. An application packet, when someone arranged for their block to be transferred into the Torres system, they had to provide all the documents that they currently had relating to their block. And the titles office bundled all those together with some information that they gathered, and it was stored in something called an application packet. So if you're looking for a full history of a block of land going back, and the deed of grant was issued before 1862, there's a strong possibility you might be arranging to get a copy of an application packet. There are 10,000 application packets in our storage area. The deeds of grant in the old system have all been scanned, so they're available. The certificates of indenture have not yet been scanned, and the application packets have not yet been scanned. The next system that was introduced in 1862 is the Torrens system, and I talk of it in terms of paper records because how we used how they were recorded on paper documents. The dates were from 1862 to 1993. And in terms of document types, you have the deed of grant and the certificates of title, and both of those have all been scanned by our department and are available for purchase. In 1994, they introduced the computerized records system. It's the automated title system, ATS, and it's I get the correct description. It's a computerised legal register of freehold land, state tenure land and reserve land in Queensland. So that's the current system we use, the automated title system. Okay. I'm now going to look at actually show you some titles and talk to you about the type of information that titles show. And I'm focusing on Derrington, the number 5, 6th Avenue, Kedron. It's original property description, and this is the information that was contained, or should have been contained on Carmel's slide. It's sub 134 of re-sub A, of sub 2 of portion 5, parish of Kedron. And the current description is lot 134 on survey plan RP 25044. Okay. The first title issued was the deed of grant. Over that portion, that's the title's reference number. It was issued in 1879, so you immediately know that's after 1862, so all the land dealings, all the titles dealing with this block were issued under the Torrens system. So they're the most very straightforward to obtain copies. And at this stage, the block was 102 acres. That's what the title looks like. So that's a scan of the original title. And I'm now going to just highlight different parts of that title. Okay. We've got the title's reference number. That's the unique number that's allocated to this particular title. There were 2 numbering systems allocated to titles. This is an example of the first system. It's a title number, and it was a running number that was allocated to all the titles that were issued by our department. We've got the date of purchase and the area of block and the name of the first owner. So that's all the information that's come off from that first title. Okay. And this is further down. It has the area again, 102 acres. It has the property description. It's portion 5, parish of Kedron, county of Stanley, and it's got a meets and bounds description. Deeds of grant that were issued in the old land system didn't include, if I go to the next, I'll mention, come back to that. That's the date that the actual document was signed and the volume and folio number. Okay. And that's the description. That's the diagram that's included on the title. Deeds of grant issued before 1862 did not include a diagram. They only had a meets and bounds description. So they would have said on this side, this number of links and this bearing. Okay. I just wanted to mention that title's reference number, as I was saying before, that was one of the numbering systems that were used. Okay. The second numbering system that they used is the volume and folio. Okay, So the volume and folio. When we were scanning all of these titles to have them captured, they had to give every title a unique number, and the unique number that they came up with is something called the titles reference number. And whenever I'm searching for titles, that's the critical number. It's the titles reference number. And how they created that number, they based it on the volume and folio. The titles reference number has to have 8 characters. The first character is determined by whether the title was issued in the Southern District, which is around Brisbane, the Central District, Rockhampton-based, and the Northern District. The number allocated to the Southern region is the 1, so that's why the titles reference number has a 1. The volume number is included in the next 4 characters, so we've only got 3 characters, 352, so they've had to put a 0 first and then 352, and then 3 characters are allocated to the folio. We've only got 97, so we have to put a 0 first. So based on that volume and folio for this title, the unique number that our department came up with is 1035297. And I'm looking at a number of titles over this particular block, and I'll be drawing your attention to this titles reference number, and you'll always see that it's been created from the volume and folio. Okay. The next title that was issued in 1897, and the block has been subdivided. So we've got sub 2 of portion 5, parish of Kedron. That's the titles reference number, and you'll find the volume and folio will be, the volume will be 924 and the folio will be 224. With the volumes and folios, there are usually 250 folios are bound together in one volume. So you'll have volume 924, folio 1 through to folio 250. That's the normal. Okay. So that's what this title looks like. And this is a really good example of what happened to some of our titles through time. Before it was scanned, you can see it's been very lived in. It's been torn and damaged. And there is information missing. Like, you can't read all the details of the transfers and information there. Someone in pencil later on has added what the following on volume and folio are, which is theirs. So sometimes you can be really unlucky if you're searching for titles for a block of land. You might come across a title that part of the information sadly is missing. And there's nothing that we can really do to recreate that. We can usually find the volume and folio follows ons, but other than that, there's not much we can do. Fortunately, there are not many of the titles have been damaged in this way. Okay, this, I've shown this to show with our titles, there's always linkages, and they're really, when you're searching for the history of all the titles issued over a block of land, you need linkages. You need to either be able to work from the original title forward to find the next title, or you can work from the current title and try and find the title that was issued prior to that. And they created the linkages, the forward linkages, by, this is the previous title from the deed of grant. So on that title, there was a stamp. The last stamp said, request to issue certificate of title for subs 1 and 2, because they've subdivided our portion 5. And this is the new volume and folios that replace the deed of grant. So there's 924, mine's 224. Mine's 224. 223 would be the sub 1. Okay, so that's the forward link. From the original title, I can find out what the next title is. On this title, if I wanted to find what the previous title was, it has number of previous, and it has deed of grant, and it's got 39087. So it's giving the title number, that running title number, to tell me what the previous document issued. So I use that information all the time when I'm looking for a history of a block of land through titles. Okay, so this one, it contains the titles reference number, the title number, the volume and folio, the name of the owner, the property description, and the area. Then it has all the details, all the transfers, who the block was transferred to and when. So these are like the endorsements on the title. So it was transferred, the whole of the block was transferred to Mr. Isles in 1889, I think. Okay. The next title that was issued over our block, I'm moving from when it was really large to finding our small little 16 perch lot 134. Okay, so now it's subdivided, so there's a resub A, and I assume there's a resub B. Okay, so we've got the titles reference number, 18, this is issued in 1899, and the area's getting smaller, 96 acres, so we've gone from 102 and we're slowly going down. Okay, so that's what the title looks like. And the two titles that I've shown you so far only had 2 pages. They had the front and the back. They were really straightforward. This one has actually 14 pages, and it's a really important title because this is when the owner of the block has subdivided our resub A into really tiny, small blocks, including our lot 134. So that's why it's got 14 pages. So as the person sold off each, he subdivided it, had a survey plan drawn, had that passed by the relevant people and the survey plan lodged. He then started selling off the blocks, and he started selling them off, I know ours is 1917, but the first date, and as a block was sold off, they put a stamp on this transfer, a stamp on this title, and then they would create a new certificate of title with a new volume number and folio. So there are 14 pages of all the different blocks sold off from that really large block. Okay, so, and again, we've got the transfer. So the previous title said that the next title was that, and that matches what our current title is. This said the previous, the number of the previous reference was the title, the deed, the title number, the 149734. Please remember that number, because 2 numbering systems, of course, at some stage, you're going to change your mind on how you're going to refer to the previous title, because at this point in 1899, they're using the title number. But by the next title, which is dated 1917, they've changed their mind and they're using the volume and folio reference, which just makes it a bit more challenging to move between the documents. Again, if you can use one system, why use 2? It's better, they must have decided, why have only one system when you can use 2 and make it really complicated for anyone in the future. So this has the titles reference number, and see how it says page 1 of 14? The title number, the volume and folio, the name of the owner, the property description and the area. And this is where it's showing the details on, in my case, this was taken from page 2 of the 14-page document. And this tells me that the next title was issued over subs 132 to 134. There's 134. It was issued to Martin Joseph Lonegan. The paperwork was produced on the 28th of November 1917, and it was registered. So this stamp went on the document on the 11th of December 1917. And this is the next volume and folio that was created to create that title. So, and so this is, like, he's selling ours block in November. Up here, it's 20th of November. Down here, it's 28th of November. So he's selling off all these blocks through time. And I think I checked, he was still selling off some of these blocks in 1946. And it's recorded on that title. Okay, the next title, we've got our subs 132, 133, and 134. So we're now 1 rood, 8 perches, dated 1917. That's what the title looks like. And I just love our titles. Something went wrong with the ink. If I'm left-handed and I'm not very neat, I would have struggled if I had to, when I was drawing maps, I was using something called a rapidograph. I would have struggled if I had to have used ink and a nib. I just couldn't have done it. My map would have looked with splotches all over it. Okay, so again, we've got the previous title. That's the volume and folio, so it matches. That's the link from the previous title to this one. And this is where they've changed. The previous title, instead of being the deed, the title number is now volume and folio. Okay. As I mentioned before, to create that really important number, that critical number for searching all of these titles, that titles reference number, they based it on the volume and folio. So when I'm going from current title, making my way back, searching for titles, get to this point, it's really straightforward. I can just convert that immediately to a titles reference number, put it in my search mechanism. But when I get to titles with that, the title number, that running number, someone in our department created a finding guide that helps you convert those numbers to volume and folios, which then I can convert to a titles reference number. Okay, we're in Martin Lonegan, 1 Rood, 8 perches. These are all the stamps that are on the back of that diagram. And the interesting thing here is he's split off. Subs 132, 133 went to this person in 1927, and this is our block that we're chasing. Sub 134, he still held on to, but that's the new title that was issued. Oh, actually, it's gone to Mary Knox. So the whole 3 blocks were transferred to Mary Knox in 1919, and then she sold off those 2 blocks, and she's held on to this block. So as you can imagine, the next title that we see is going to have a titles reference number of 1736006. And there it is. Okay, it's dated 1928. And we're finally at just our sub 134. That's what the title looks like. And this title's critical because this has the transfer to our packer. So we found the gentleman who we know actually built the house. So that's the transfer to our packer. And down there. Just hang on. I'll go to the next slide. That's the backwards and forwards, Knox. Packer in 1930. I wasn't going crazy. So that's when it was transferred to William Packer in 1930, because I think you said the house was built around there.
31.
Yeah.
March 31.
So that's the titles can provide. The next title issued over the block were issued in half shares in 1958, and then and it remained the title until 2001, and that's a copy of the current historical title search for the current title of the block. And we know it was issued in 2001, which is after 1994. So we're now looking at an example of the types of information that you have printed out from our automated titles system. And this has the date created, 2001, that's the titles reference number, and these are the previous titles, which are the ones that I mentioned before. And in the automated title system, they had to distinguish those titles from the paper-based records. The paper-based records, as I mentioned, always started with a 1 if it was in the southern region, 2 if it was in the northern, and 3 if it was in the central. Well, in this new system, if it's a certificate of title equivalent, it starts with a 5. If it's a deed of grant issued in this post-1994, it'll start with a 4. So, okay. I'm now going to, so that's what titles look like, and that's the sorts of information that you can get from them. They're dealing with ownership of land. They're not saying when the house is built, so they cannot tell you when a house is built. I'm really, really, really sorry, they just can't. They can't tell you the street number for a block of land. And the property description in 99% times has no link to the street address, because it's like lot 134 on RP, blah. That has no link to number 5, 6th Avenue. So they're totally different things. And I'm really sorry, we have no record of a name of a house on our titles either, so they can't help with that. But what they can help with, as Carmel mentioned, they can tell you when the block first came into being. So we know our block, the house, there's a really strong possibility that the house couldn't have been built before 1917 because the block didn't have its first title issued over it until 1917. It can tell you when a mortgage was taken out over the land and how much, but we don't know. You can suggest that perhaps the mortgage was taken out to build a house, but we have no confirmation of that. It's just a clue. Okay? It can tell you the names of the people who own the block of land through time. So we have the names of the people that we have from 1917 were Lonegan, Knox, and Packer. So those would be the names that I'd be searching through in Trove and post office directories. It gives you the property description. You can use that property description through the Brisbane City Archives and also Trove. Okay, how do you purchase copies of these titles? For the old land system, please come to me, because I can arrange, advise on application packet numbers and talk to you about the certificates of indenture. The Torrens system paper records, you can go to our business centres to purchase copies. The Torrens computer records, again, it's our business centres. The image of titles, so if you wanted to purchase any of those copies that I have shown, currently they're $17 per image of title. To do the current historical title search, that's, I think, $24.35 at the moment. We have other resources that you can access through our department. The McKellar series, 1895, they just show blocks of land, they don't show buildings. So useful to work out where your blocks, and they show the street names. It's a really good series, and our department had over 5,000 scans of historical cadastral maps, and about a year ago we released them for free via open data. So that's the URL, and on the fact sheet that you picked up from me, it has that address. So you can access, there are 40 series of historical cadastral maps that we've made available. They date from 1841 to 2005. There are the 12 sheets of the McKellar series that cover the inner suburbs. There's the Moreton District AG2 series, which usually show the first name of the person to take up freehold title over the southeast area of Queensland. And we also, if you want to find the current lot on plan description, we have this application called Queensland Globe. It allows you to get the current lot on plan, and it allows you to create a map over a particular block that shows the cadastral information, so the lot plan, tenure, and the area, and again for free. Topographic maps, they're really useful because they can show little squares for buildings, and they're useful at a point in time. So this is a copy of a map from Rosewood, dated 1978. So if you lived in this block and you wanted to know when your house was built, you'd say at least there was a building of some sort there in 1978. Okay, we've just released in the last month or so scans of our historical topographic maps available for free via open data, and the date range is 10 series, 1886 through to, I think, 2000, we'll say 2000. And there are only two maps around the 1880s. They're a topographic map at the mouth of the Brisbane River and Fort Lytton. The majority, there's also a mapping series, 18 sheets over Gympie in 1910, and then the next, so if you're researching in the Gympie area, you've got a head start on everyone. And then the real ones that cover more of the state start from 1925, 1 mile military maps over the Brisbane area and surrounds from 1925. And we've released, if you want current topographic information, we've released this application called QTopo. And again, you can create a topographic map over any part of Queensland for free. Orthophoto maps, they have an aerial photo image and contours on top. So this one's at a scale of 1 to 2,500. It's Chermside 24. This has got there's our number 5, 6th Avenue. Okay, so it again captures buildings at a point in time. So you have to check when the aerial photography was flown. This is in 1980. Okay, we've just released scans of these, and that's how you can access them. And that 1 to 2,500 series over Brisbane, they date from about the late 1970s through to the early 1980s. And those orthophoto maps, the earliest is 1977, so they're fairly recent things. Okay, survey plans. Crown survey plans can show buildings where the buildings were there first before the surveyor came out and surveyed. This is the town of Muddaborough, so the hotels and all the buildings were there before the surveyors came out. And it's a wonderful survey plan. And the historical group from Muddaborough were really happy to find this plan because they were researching the history of the hotels. And look, we've got Landsborough Hotel and all the fences and all the buildings. There's a cottage and a store. So they were really lucky. But this is incredibly, incredibly rare to find buildings on our plans. And plans that are drawn over freehold blocks, this is an example, they never, ever, ever show buildings. So it's no point using... if it's a freehold block, there's no point at all investigating those plans. Okay, you can access them from purchase them from our business centres, the black and white copies, and if you want a high resolution colour copy, contact them and make an appointment and discuss. Okay. Aerial photography, this is an example. Here's our block in 1969. Our department holds aerial photography from 1936 onwards, and that's what you have to do if you wish to investigate some viewing and purchasing copies of some aerial photos, because we'll have a series over a particular spot. The 1936 is over parts of Brisbane. It's not over any other parts of the state. The majority of the aerial photography that we hold over different parts of the state are from about the 1940s onwards. And like I know this particular block, there might have been 30 different series of photographs flown over that one block, and they'll be flown at different heights, so some you can zoom in really closely. So you can capture an area really well through aerial photography. Okay, so thank you.